Hello everybody, welcome to my channel. In today's video, I'm going to do my best to answer a question by a viewer, someone who comments a lot, and I love their comments, and I'm going to probably butcher this name, but bear with me. Akaro Kiko, hope I said that right, or somewhat close to right. Anyways, the question is about, can you explain how your DNA changes after a Kundalini awakening? And I'm not really a science person, so I'm gonna be honest with y'all, I had to look up what is DNA. And a lot of you are just gonna have to turn the thing off right now, I get it. But DNA is a carrier of genetic information, fundamental and distinctive characteristics of or qualities of someone or something, and the molecule of life. So reading that, I was just like, okay, yes, I can talk about how the DNA changes as we have a Kundalini awakening. First thing, and this really ties into what I've been learning today about who I am genetically. So when we have a Kundalini awakening, before we have a Kundalini awakening, we all have this, like our father lives in us, our mother lives in us, our ancestors live in us, live through us. That genetic lineage is passed down. And before an awakening, we may just be acting out conditioned behavior or our genetic programming. And this is something that we are just unconsciously doing, and it just leads us to try to be like our father, who tried to be like his father, who tried to be like his father. And so often, I'll just speak from my experience, so often we grow up, if we're someone who really clashed with our father, like I did, we say, I want to be nothing like this man, and we try to escape him, and just we leave the house and we swear we're never going to be like him, right? But the thing is he's still living in us, and we haven't changed the Father who lives in us yet. So of course we're going to keep replicating that genetic conditioning, that genetic programming. And we're going to start speaking to people and acting and having the same behavioral patterns that our father did. We're going to start doing the same thing when we grow up as adults. And I noticed this in myself for all of my 20s. I couldn't stand my dad growing up, and we did not get along at all. And I noticed I was really a lot like him in my 20s, and this did not change until my Kundalini awakening, and it's still something that I can see is evolving. It's still something that I'm still learning to heal the Father within me, heal the part of him. Like, he is in me, he is living in me through genetics, and his Father is living through him, and still kind of living through me. So until I have fully changed the Father within me, the external Father, the relationship with my dad, will never be transformed. And that's something a Kundalini awakening is going to do for you. Really, it's going to do it for you, and it's going to be probably very painful, but it's going to change that genetic, we'll call it coding, that genetic, the genetic, what do they call it? The molecule of life. Your molecules of life are changing. You're becoming a different person. You're becoming completely your unique self with no conditioning. Your genetic lineage, you're healing all of that. All those wounds from generations and generations. It's now your turn in the karmic cycle of life. It's now your turn to heal it. And as you heal that inside of you, as you heal the Father inside of you and those wounds, and as you begin to accept and love, your Father inside of you, then you begin to change those genetic codes inside of you to, maybe your father was a really angry person and he was really bitter towards you and he was not emotionally available. And all of those codes got passed to you, and you were carrying them, and maybe you were unconsciously just acting them out, and you became bitter and angry and emotionally unavailable for others, and all of those things that were passed down to you, you were acting them out. Well, when you go through a Kundalini awakening, you start learning how to love those aspects of yourself, and when those aspects arise, you shine compassion and love on them, and in that way, those genetic imprints in you, they radically transform, and you become a vessel not for your genetic coding. You become a vessel for something greater. You transcend conditioned and wounded lineage that was really dictating all of your actions. You transcend that, and you start becoming not separate from it. It's still a part of you, but you've healed it. It ends there. You see, what your father did to you and what his father did to him we'll just say my own example, speaking honestly, is, I could see my grandpa. He was a really angry guy a lot of the time. I love him to death, and God bless his soul. And I had a lot of fun with him as a child, but he had a rough time with a lot of things emotionally. And my grandpa, I could see how his pain body was so intense, and he had such a hard time with negative emotions, and he didn't have any tools, to really work through them. So he just buried them and repressed them. And I was looking at a picture of him the other day, and he was trying to smile in this picture, and this was towards the end of his life, but he had this like permanent frown on his face, and it just kind of broke my heart. And I was looking at a picture of my dad next to it, and I could see my dad still could do it, but I could see also how my dad could start over time as he gets older, just following that same type of genetic imprint, that same type of, all those wounds and that pain body was passed to him, and now he's going through that same thing I think my grandpa go through. And but when you go through a Kundalini awakening, like all that stuff got passed to me too, right? And it was playing out in my 20s, big time. And I was on that same track. But through the Kundalini awakening, I have healed a lot of those wounds and that trauma, and so much it was steeped in fear. Anger is just a form of fear. Because when you're angry, you're just really afraid you're not going to get your way and what that's going to mean for you. And so through healing that lineage, it's not like it goes away and I'm like not part of that anymore. I have just transformed that DNA, and all that pain body, all that trauma that was passed down through the family lineage, it ended here with me. This was if I do end up having a son or a daughter, it will not be passed on, because my DNA has been transformed through healing, through opening to these, learning the tools of how to transmute darkness into light, essentially, to say it very succinctly. And I think that's the main thing for me that hits home. And I don't know how well this answered it, what kind of answer you wanted. I mean, there's a lot of stuff about this, but essentially you're going to get like an upgrade. And when I say upgrade, I don't mean like, you're better than and others are less than, or like you're gonna be better or worse. I mean, your consciousness is going to be higher. Like your level of awareness is going to be higher. And whenever we're bringing in more awareness and more light, our DNA has to change to be able to embody that light. And this process of allowing the DNA to upgrade and allowing it to be more of a match for the higher consciousness that you're opening to, it can be pretty bloody awful at times, because a lot of change requires, and a lot of growth requires pain and suffering. So when we're going through a DNA upgrade, we're going to feel a lot of the pain that we need to feel to let go of the old, so that the DNA, so that literally the molecules in your body can release a lot of that stored up emotional pain. And that's why I always say things like yin yoga is wonderful, because it really helps you to feel into these older DNA patterns and all these older repressed emotions that need to really come up, so that we can create this space for the light to come in and to heal our being, And your distinctive characteristics and qualities, they're going, you're going to still have your personality, and it might remain somewhat similar. But I was talking to my mom the other day, and last thing I'll say, this video's kind of gotten long and rambly. I was talking to my mom the other day, and we met this UPS guy at the store she was working at in town, and he was nice and everything, but he just wouldn't be genuine with you. Everything he said was a joke or sarcastic. You didn't know if he's being serious or messing with you. And I was just trying to be so genuine and open with him, and he was just like, being silly, and it was whatever. I didn't really have much of an opinion, but I was talking to my mom at home, and I was like, it's interesting how we all take on these personas to be able to engage with life. How some people will put on this persona and others will put on this persona. And I was like, I've had to just totally deconstruct the persona that I tried to use for however many years. And that's the main thing that Kundalini is going to do. It's going to deconstruct any type of mask or any type of persona that you're trying to put forth to get a certain result and a certain reaction out of people. That's not going to fly anymore. You're going to have to just be raw and authentic and honest, and just kind of let the cards fall where they do. The chips fall where they are, whatever the saying is. Basically, you're just going to have to be yourself. And to do that, you're going to have to learn about who you really are. And to do that, you're going to have to heal your DNA. And to heal your DNA, you just have to be open and trusting and allow the energy to do what it wants to do without being too worried about it, or being too trying to control it, or wanting a certain result. Because early in the Kundalini awakening, you might think, what am I going to get out of this? But you're not going to get anything out of it. It's not going to it's not that way. It just brings you more of a desire to do what is in your highest evolutionary interest to do. And that's the simplest way to do it. And that might be something that your ego likes, and it might not be. And truthfully, it's not going to matter after a certain amount of time. Once your DNA starts changing, when your DNA changes, the way your ego is utilized shifts too. So before your DNA shifts, your ego is just a mechanism, is just a vehicle for your family, for your lineage that's been passed down to you to run through. And so, like I was saying, in my 20s, there's just all conditioning, and my ego was just a vessel for all of my dad's emotional stuff and his dad's emotional stuff, and on. Generations of emotional pain and trauma and fear were just running my ego, right? When you go through a Kundalini awakening and your DNA changes, your ego is now repurposed as an instrument for divine will. And a lot of times that sounds really amazing, and it is, and it's beautiful, and I am so appreciative for having this evolution and shift in my life. But at the same time, serving God's will is not always about being comfortable. So you're going to be asked to do so many things that your ego doesn't necessarily want to do, but it's going to become irrelevant. And over time, your ego will start aligning with the divine will, and your ego will actually desire doing things that maybe aren't the most comfortable, but the ego knows it's good for itself, it's good for the being, and it's good for the collective. And your DNA will shift from self-interest and service to self, to selfless service and service to the one, because you are the one. So when you serve others, you are serving yourself. But yeah, that was my 15-minute impromptu intuitive explanation of how DNA changes when we go through a Kundalini awakening. I hope that somewhat answers your question, Akaro Kiko. And I'm sorry if I'm saying your name wrong. I'm trying my best, but hope you guys got something out of this, and I look forward to connecting with you all in the next video. Namaste.